Chapter 101. Tai Sui Lin Yang and his mother arrived at his grandmother's house. As soon as they came in, they saw his two aunts were there too. After a brief greeting, Lin Yang headed straight for Uncle Yang Feng's room. He pushed the door open and said bluntly, "Uncle, I know why you wanted to marry that brick factory manager's foolish daughter. He's been threatening you, hasn't he?" Uncle Yang Feng's face went pale. The small object he'd been fiddling with slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a clatter. He had never told anyone about it, but his nephew had exposed the whole thing at once. He stammered, How did you know?" "Don't worry about it. If you ask me, you've been too foolish," Lin Yang replied, his voice carrying both reproach and concern. "You keep putting up with it yourself, but won't tell the family." Uncle Yang Feng sighed, helpless and worried. Duwengi is infamous. Someone once mocked his daughter, and he had people run that person over with a car, left them badly injured. The driver claimed it was an accident, called 120 quickly, and paid the medical bills. The law couldn't touch him. He's capable of anything. If he really does something to us, it'll be too late by then. Lin Yang stepped closer and looked at him resolutely. Avoiding someone like Du Wenge only makes things worse. Do you trust me? Seeing how confident and steady his nephew had become after all his years away, Uncle Yang Feng nodded heavily. You're so capable now. Of course I trust you. All right, leave it to me. I'll handle it. Lin Yang patted his uncle's shoulder. And until this is resolved, don't do anything foolish like actually marrying that girl. His uncle murmured, feeling a weight lift from his chest. Lin Yang pulled him out of the room. He'd been cooped up under his grandmother and aunt's care for days and needed some fresh air. When they stepped into the hallway, his grandmother, mother, and two aunts were waiting at the door, eyes wet. Grandma was the first to step forward, taking Lin Yang's hand with a trembling voice. Yang, you're truly amazing. If it weren't for you, your uncle's life would have been ruined." His mother, Yang Kaixia, sighed with relief. "Xiaoyang, I knew you'd handle it. You pulled your uncle out of the fire." "My boy's been clever since he was little," his eldest aunt added. "Now look at him, solving such a thorny problem." "Thanks to Yang," his second aunt agreed. "We'd have been at a loss without him. He's bound to do great things." They moved into the living room and sat down. The eldest aunt went to make tea and served everyone. With the immediate crisis eased, the family's tension began to relax. Lin Yang used the moment to put the next part of his plan into motion, moving his grandmother and uncle out of the old house. "Grandma," he said gently, "that place is too old and dilapidated. When it rains, the river floods this low area. It's not safe. Have you thought about moving to a new house?" Grandma smiled, the lines on her face deep with age. "Of course I'd like to, but the old house isn't worth much, and your uncle just started work and has no savings. We want to, but we can't." Lin Yang squeezed her hand. "You were so good to me when I was little. Now that I can, let me buy a house for you and Uncle." Both Grandma and Uncle waved their hands in refusal. Uncle frowned. Xiaoyang, a house isn't small change. Even the cheapest in town is 200,000 or 300,000 yuan. Your money doesn't grow on trees. You can't waste it." Yang Kaixia chimed in. "Mom, every time the Tuojiang River floods, you both worry. Xiaoyang has the means. Please accept it." They were stubborn, though, and kept refusing. Lin Yang changed tack, speaking more firmly. "Grandma, if Uncle doesn't marry that girl, Duweng won't let him be. It's safer to move into a community with good public security. The odds of danger drop a lot." At the mention of Duweng, Grandma's face turned serious. After a quiet exchange with Uncle, she finally agreed. "Xiaoyang, we'll let you help buy a house, but the money will be considered a loan from me. Yang Feng will repay you in installments." "All right," Lin Yang said without hesitation. He knew the important thing was getting them to move. As for the installment idea, he had no intention of enforcing it. Once the old house was cleared and sold, some of that money would go to them, and they would be secure. That same day, Lin Yang drove Grandma, his mother, and Uncle to the best community in the county, Haijintang, to look at houses. The sales office greeted them with a smiling agent who went over the development's advantages in a polished pitch. Haijintang is one of the top communities in town. It has full amenities, schools, hospitals, malls, everything close by. The landscaping feels like a park. It's very pleasant to live here. They toured several model homes. The moment Uncle Yang Feng stepped into a 120 square meter unit, his face lit up. The living room was bright and spacious, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows onto a clean floor. The bedrooms were warm and well laid out. The kitchen and bathroom felt modern and practical. He walked the rooms, touching the walls, opening cabinets, a look of satisfaction on his face. "This house is really good," he said. "Spacious, well lit, we'd live comfortably here." Grandma nodded, pleased but worried. "It's lovely, if only it weren't for the price." Seeing her hesitation, Lin Yang smiled. "Grandma, don't worry about the cost. If you and Uncle are happy here, it's worth it." The salesperson added helpfully, "Auntie, it's very cost-effective now. We have a promotion. This unit is 350,000 yuan. For a house like this in our county, that's a great price." After a little discussion, they decided it was right for them, and Lin Yang bought it on the spot. Completing the paperwork felt like a huge relief. He drove Grandma and Uncle to view the new place and then returned to his home with his mother. At home, he found his father, Lin Weiguo, and asked about the driver's license application. "Dad, how's the license coming along?" Lin Weiguo smiled. "I signed up with an old buddy. It's 3,280 yuan. Guaranteed pass." "All right," Lin Yang said, satisfied. Then his father remembered something with a grin. "Hey, you free now? I saw someone selling succulents by the village entrance. Cheap. The seller said succulents do well in peat soil, but his peat was over 10 yuan per jin. I saw a stand of pine trees at the foot of Phoenix Ridge. The fallen needles have rotted into loose, good soil. Want to come dig some with me?" Lin Yang knew his father loved tinkering with plants, and seeing him that enthusiastic, agreed readily. "Sure, let's take the tools and go." They took shovels and woven bags and walked happily toward Phoenix Ridge, northeast of the village. It wasn't high, but its slopes were backed by a dense pine forest. Sunlight filtered through the branches in golden patches. The forest floor was carpeted in a thick, soft layer of pine needles with that faint, resinous scent. They found a spot where the soil looked rich and began to dig. Lin Weiguo drove his shovel in and turned up a clod. As he reached to put the soil in the bag, he froze. There was something odd in it, translucent, gelatinous, like white jelly. "Hey, son, quick, look at this," he called. He brushed the rest of the soil away. There, half buried, was a gelatinous, translucent mass several times the size of a wash basin. Lin Weiguo's face went suddenly serious. He glanced around to make sure no one was nearby, then lowered his voice and whispered to Lin Yang, "Son, it looks a lot like the legendary Tai Sui." Chapter 102, 5 million deposit. Tai Sui? How could this be such a coincidence? Lin Yang's mind raced. The intel he'd gotten that morning had said a Tai Sui had been unearthed at Phoenix Ridge, and that the so-called auction house scheme might be aimed at him. He quickly called his father. "Dad, what happened when you went to buy succulents today?" "Son, what's the matter?" "Today a man in a minivan pulled up at the entrance to the village. He was selling succulents. When he saw me walking by, he asked if I wanted any." Lin Weiguo told the story. He hadn't meant to buy anything, but the price was too cheap to resist, so he bought a few. The seller then enthusiastically lectured him on succulent care, stressing how important good potting soil was. Lin Weiguo had wanted to buy the seller's peat soil, but it was too expensive. The seller shrugged and said it wasn't impossible to do without peat. Pine needle soil from a nearby pine forest could also work. That's why Lin Weiguo had remembered the pine grove under Phoenix Ridge and asked his son to come along to dig soil. Hearing the whole account, Lin Yang's plan took shape. The setup was too deliberate to be an accident. From selling succulents to his father, to pushing the importance of pricey peat, to telling him pine soil would do and leading him to Phoenix Ridge, it all fit a pattern. The auction house, people were almost certainly trying to separate them from whatever they'd find there. If nothing had gone wrong, the auction house people should be making their move now. As if on cue, two middle-aged men in outdoor jackets and hiking shoes approached. When Lin Weiguo saw strangers coming, he hurriedly scraped fallen leaves back over the spot he dug. "Brother, we got lost hiking up the ridge. Can you help us get out?" one of the men asked in a friendly tone. The other man glanced down at the disturbed leaves and, pretending to adjust his foot, nudged them aside to reveal what lay beneath. When he saw it, he let out an exaggerated gasp. Holy cow! Isn't that Tai Sui? Brother, you're so lucky. You actually dug up a Tai Sui. The second man jumped in awed. No way. There's Tai Sui on this mountain. Lin Guo frowned. He'd had a sinking feeling. It really is Tai Sui, he thought. He could have quietly taken it home, but now these two knew. Were they dangerous? Quick, dig it out. I heard if a Tai Sui is found and you don't dig it up, it will run away and you'll regret it, one man urged. Lin Guo had heard tales about old ginseng running away, but never about Tai Sui escaping. He wasn't so gullible. It's just pine resin that swelled in the rain, he said firmly. The two men didn't buy it. That's not pine resin, it's Tai Sui. We both work at an auction house. We've seen Tai Sui before. I guarantee what's in the ground is 100% Tai Sui. If it isn't, I'll stand on my head, wash my hair, and eat excrement. Why are you two like this? I told you it's not. Leave me be and don't interfere. Lin Guo snapped, trying to shoo them away. The scammers exchanged worried looks. This guy's stubborn. What do we do? Think of another angle. We can't let this fat sheep run off. Just as they were stumped, Lin Yang stepped in. Dad, if it really is Tai Sui, won't it run away? We should dig it up now. Those words were exactly what the scammers needed but hadn't expected. Their faces lit up. What an idiot. He's so easy to trick. Where did he get all his money? One whispered, eyes gleaming. See, your son agrees with us. Hurry and dig it out. For a moment, Lin Guo was stunned. He couldn't believe his son would be so gullible. Then he hesitated and realized Lin Yang might have seen through something. Maybe it was better to play along. All right, son, you're right. Let's dig it up. It can't hurt. Okay, Dad. Lin Yang crouched down and helped dig. The pine needle soil was loose, and they quickly unearthed the object. It was a sticky, reddish-white mass, several times the size of a wash basin. It looked like white jelly, but tougher. The shovel didn't cut through it easily. Wow, it really is Tai Sui, one of the men breathed. A white Tai Sui that big is rare. The last Tai Sui in an auction was a bit smaller and sold for 100,000 per gram. How much would this be worth? The other said, imagining fortunes. You've struck it rich. This thing is worth at least several billion, they gushed. Are you going to eat it yourselves or sell it? Before Lin Guo could answer, Lin Yang jumped in, playing the fool perfectly. We don't have the right channels to sell something like this. He'd already been briefed. The scammer's trick was to pretend to be auction house agents and then demand a large deposit to cover their costs. He followed the scammer's logic to draw them further in. The man introduced himself and produced a business card. We work with an auction house, one of the best in the country. If you don't have sales channels, entrust it to us. We charge the lowest commission. The card read, Christie's Auction House, Agent Zhang Ping, Tel 174. It looked convincing. The man was a practiced actor. Lin Yang pretended to mull it over, then said, All right, we'll consign the Tai Sui to your auction house. Zhang Ping's face brightened. Great choice, but there's something I need to explain. Organizing an auction requires a lot of manpower and resources. If you back out, our costs won't be covered, so we require a deposit based on the item's estimated value. He paused to make it sound reasonable. This Tai Sui is over 30 kilograms. At 100,000 per gram, its value is at least 3 billion. The deposit would be 5 million. Lin Yang nodded, feigning concern but agreement. I understand. That's reasonable. Zhang Ping was ecstatic. The con was going smoother than he dared hope. But Lin Yang wasn't finished. He smiled and added, I don't have 5 million in cash. How about this? We mortgage the Tai Sui to your auction house as security, so you don't have to worry about us backing out. When Zhang Ping heard Lin Yang say he was going to mortgage the Tai Sui with the auction house, his face went white and panic flashed through his eyes. The Tai Sui had been forged by them from silicone. If it really went to auction, their scam would be blown. He looked around, then forced a calm expression and waved his hand. I'm sorry, our auction house doesn't take items as collateral. To put something up for auction, you have to pay a deposit first. That's standard procedure. We can't make an exception. He spoke with forced certainty, hoping the sensible-sounding excuse would kill Lin Yang's idea. Lin Weiguo, standing to the side, immediately felt something was off. He hadn't been to an auction himself, but he'd heard enough about them. Who doesn't let people mortgage things? From the start, these two had been pushing how valuable the Tai Sui was, insisting it could only fetch a high price at auction. Even a fool could see the incongruity. He glanced at his son and inwardly nodded. Of course his son had seen through them. Still, Lin Weigo was puzzled. If Lin Yang had already figured it out, why pretend to be taken in? He didn't ask. His son had a plan, and he would follow it. Lin Yang knew they were scammers, but he kept a calm, conflicted air. "I don't have 5 million, he said. "Don't you have a Yangwang U8? You could mortgage it." Zhongping blurted. The moment the words left his mouth, regret flashed over his face. His accomplice shot him a furious look. Too impatient, he'd given them away. Zhongping scrambled to cover his slip. "I just saw a Yangwang U8 drive up the mountain a little while ago. I thought it might be yours." The excuse was clumsy. Even he knew it, but Lin Yang played along as if he believed it. He considered for a moment, then nodded gently. "All right, I'll try. I'll contact you once I've raised 5 million, and then I'll bring the Tai Sui to your auction house." Good. Zhongping and his partner brightened instantly, as if they'd been handed a long-awaited gift. "Big brother, little brother, you've worked hard. Let us help you move it. A treasure like this must be handled carefully." Zhongping rolled up his sleeves and, fawning, took the Tai Sui in both hands. It was large and slimy and maddeningly slippery. He strained, face red, sweat beading, and running down his temples. His partner hurried over to help. Although it weighed only a few dozen pounds, the slick surface offered no grip. The two of them heaved and grunted as if carrying a few 100 pounds, finally managing to stuff it into the car trunk. "Phew, it's finally in," Zhongping panted, wiping his sweating brow. His shirt clung to his back as if he'd just climbed out of water. Before they could rest, Lin Yang remembered something. "Oh, Dad, we came up here to dig and collect pine needle soil. How could we forget?" "Wait here, we'll go dig." Zhongping and the partner protested eagerly, already heading back to where they'd unearthed the Tai Sui. They grabbed the snakeskin bag and squatted down, shoveling pine needle soil into it. Zhongping tamped it down with each scoop so they could pack in more. Sweat drenched his forehead and ran into the soil. His partner worked equally hard, scooping and packing without a break. Lin Yang and Lin Weiguo watched the two of them panting and sweating, amusement curling under Lin Yang's smile. He played the generous host. "This is too much trouble. Let us do it." "No trouble. No trouble," Zhongping insisted, forcing a smile that looked strained. "We're happy to help. If you really want to repay us, make sure our auction house handles the Tai Sui. No backing out." They filled both snakeskin bags and, with great effort, loaded them into the trunk as well. Zhongping straightened, exhausted and breathing hard. But as soon as he thought of the 5 million he was sure would follow, his eyes shone and a triumphant grin spread across his face. His accomplice matched him, greed bright in both their faces. Lin Yang and his father had gotten 2 large bags of pine needle soil for nothing. Satisfied, Lin Yang climbed into the car and drove off. For a long time, the two scammers stood in place, waving and shouting, "Remember to contact us when you've raised the money." Their enthusiasm was almost comical, like people seeing off a beloved relative. Only when Lin Yang's car was out of sight did they let their hands fall and their smiles widen into unrestrained laughter. Zhongping clapped his partner on the shoulder. "I didn't expect this to go so smoothly. That kid looked so gullible. If this works, 5 million will be ours, enough to live worry-free. We can eat, drink, buy stuff. No more running scams." His accomplice grinned back, eyes glittering. "I don't know how he earned enough to buy a Yangwang U8. Lucky, I guess. But who cares? He's about to hand the money over to us." They dreamed out loud about expensive cars and villas and laid-back days. Then one of them sobered and warned, "Don't celebrate yet. Some fat sheep back out at the last minute. We need to be careful so the cooked duck doesn't fly away." "Don't worry," Zhongping said dismissively. "He's completely in our hands. Where else can he turn the Tai Sui for cash? He won't be able to part with those billions, so he'll cough up the deposit to get an auction going. We told him the fake Tai Sui's worth over 3 billion. Who can resist the promise of that much money?" The car kicked up a trail of dust as it drove away from Phoenix Ridge. Lin Yang kept a steady hand on the wheel. The corner of his mouth tugged into a faint, almost unreadable smile. Lin Guo, sitting in the passenger seat, still couldn't quite make sense of his son's performance. "Son," he asked finally, "you saw from the start they were swindlers, didn't you?" Lin Yang kept his eyes on the road and nodded. "Yes." "Then why play along? What were you trying to do?" Lin Guo frowned, genuinely puzzled. Lin Yang smiled mysteriously, like a child guarding a secret. He didn't answer directly. "Just wait and watch the show," he said, that same sly little smile in his voice. Lin Guo shook his head but trusted his son. If Lin Yang said so, there must be a reason. He leaned back, watching the scenery slide past, curiosity and anticipation mixing in his chest. He wondered what his son had planned, and how those two scammers would get what was coming to them. Chapter 104, You Are Such a Good Person. On Monday, Lin Yang slept until he woke naturally. By the afternoon, realizing time was running short, he took out the business card Zhongping had given him and dialed the number. The line connected immediately, as if someone had been waiting. "Hello, I'm Zhongping, an agent at Christie's. How can I help you?" "It's me." The voice on the other end brightened at once. "Is that you, little brother? Were you able to raise the money?" Lin Yang sighed. "No, I can't come up with 5 million. Even if I mortgage my car, I can only get about 1.5 million. And my house is a self-built place in the countryside. It can't be used as collateral." Hearing that, Zhongping actually felt a surge of relief. This guy was easier to manipulate than he'd thought. He'd assumed Lin Yang had more resources. He drove a nice car after all, but couldn't scrape together 5 million. Zhang had originally toyed with asking for 2 million, but he'd already told Lin Yang the deposit was 5 million, and lowering it now would look suspicious. He paused, then leaned into businesslike concern. "Brother, you know how much it costs to stage an auction. That Tai Sui you dug up yesterday is huge. It's worth at least 3 billion. 5 million is nothing compared to that. Try to find another way to raise the 5 million. As soon as the Tai Sui sells at auction, you can pay it back." Lin Yang thought for a second, then agreed helplessly. "Okay, I'll try to think of something." He hung up smiling. His plan was moving along. An hour later, he called again. "Brother Zhang, can the deposit be smaller? I really can't get 5 million. After mortgaging my car, I only got 1.5 million. I even called a classmate who works at the bank. He said he could help with a loan, but it failed review. He said my bank statement isn't heavy enough. If I could show 200,000 in monthly transactions for 3 months straight, or 500,000 in a single month, he could get me a 5 million loan." When Zhongping heard about the possibility of a loan if there were enough transactions, an idea clicked into place. He could be the one to generate the 500,000 in transactions. It would cost him interest for a few days, but then the 5 million loan would come in and he'd profit. He confirmed quickly, trying to sound cautious. "Little brother, is that true? With 500,000 in transactions, you can get a 5 million loan?" "Of course. My classmate is the manager of private deposits at Xingcheng Bank's Binjiang branch." "What's his name?" "Zhang Jun." "Okay, go talk to him. I'll also try to persuade my boss about other options." Zhongping hung up and called the bank's service number. He asked to speak to manager Zhang Jun, and after a short hold was transferred. "Hello, I'm Zhang Jun, manager of private deposit services at Xingcheng Bank, Binjiang branch." There really was a Zhang Jun. Everything Lin Yang had said checked out. About 2 hours later, Zhang called back. "Our boss says the deposit is standard procedure. It's a matter of principle. Can't be reduced. No auction work will start until the full deposit is paid." Lin Yang responded in exactly the tone he had planned. "Brother Zhang, please help me. I really can't raise 5 million. If I had 500,000 in transactions, my friend at the bank could get me the loan." That was exactly the bait. Zhongping's greed overcame caution. "Little brother, I can help you privately, but you must not tell anyone. It'll affect my work." "How will you help me?" Lin Yang asked, feigning ignorance. "I'll find a way to move 500,000 through your account," Zhongping said. "Then you'll have the transactions. Go to your classmate, get the loan, and transfer the money back." "Really? Brother Zhang, you're such a good person. Lin Yang beamed. Zhang Ping didn't actually have 500,000 sitting around. If he did, he wouldn't be getting involved in this, but he knew people who did, and that set of connections came at a price. He hated how risky it was, but 5 million was an irresistible temptation. If he could arrange the 500,000 to pass through and then be repaid, he'd only need to pay a few days' interest on it. It was worth the gamble. He drove to a mahjong parlor in the county town, one of those places with a hidden underworld. Passing through a secret door, he entered a back room. In the center stood a massive rosewood tea table with chairs on 3 sides. A man in his 30s or 40s, missing an arm, sat there calmly sipping tea. When Zhang Ping stepped in, the man smiled. "Why are you here today?" Zhang Ping bowed slightly. "Shengge, I won't beat around the bush. I urgently need money." Shengge was unfazed. "You understand the rules for borrowing from me, right? And you accept the consequences if you can't repay?" Zhang Ping nodded quickly. "I understand. I'll be able to return it in a week. I need 500,000. Shengge regarded him for a moment. 500,000 is a significant sum. The interest is high, 5 per mil daily, compounded. The figure took Zhang's breath away. 5 per mil a day sounded small until he did the math. Compounded, it was astronomical. On an annualized basis, it would become horrifying. Fortunately, Zhang intended to borrow only for a few days. Once Lin Yang secured the bank loan, the 500,000 would come back. At 0.5% a day, the daily interest was about 2,500. Expensive, but a modest price compared to the 5 million he hoped to earn. If he couldn't repay, though, the consequences would be severe, worse than any ruinous business loss. There was no hope of an ordinary life after default. He swallowed and signed on. Chapter 15. I want to call the police. The scammer transferred 500,000 yuan to me. For the massive 5 million yuan fraud, Zhang Ping decided to take a risk. He knew exactly what it meant to borrow 500,000 yuan from Shengge, but greed drowned out caution. He gritted his teeth and slipped into the secret room behind the mahjong parlor. When the cash arrived in his hands, he trembled slightly, already picturing how he'd squander it after a successful con. Just over 10 minutes after signing the agreement, the 500,000 yuan hit his account. Zhang Ping immediately called Lin Yang, unable to hide his excitement. "Brother, I got the 500,000. I can help you make the transaction flow. Use it to get that 5 million loan from your classmate. Don't forget me when you succeed." On the other end, Lin Yang's eyes flashed with a faint, barely noticeable smile. He played the grateful part perfectly. "Big brother Zhang, you're my savior. I don't know what I'd do without you. Once the loan comes through, I'll repay you properly." Lin Yang gave Zhang Ping a bank card number, one that meant nothing to him, and then waited. When his phone buzzed with an arrival notification and he saw the 500,000 yuan, a small triumphant smile touched his lips. He didn't hesitate. Grabbing the bank card, he left immediately for the police station. Counting a previous incident involving another 500,000 yuan, this was his second time at the station. He knew the routine. He walked into the service hall, found a busy officer, and with a serious face said, "Officer, I want to report a case. A scammer transferred 500,000 yuan into my bank account." The officer's pen clattered to the desk. He looked up, eyes wide and mouth open in disbelief. "What? You said a scammer transferred money to you?" Other officers gathered, equally baffled. A young cop stepped forward. "A scammer transferred money to you? That's a first." Lin Yang calmly told them everything. How he'd found the Tao tea, how the scammer had offered to help auction it, how the scammer asked for a 5 million yuan deposit, how the bank refused the loan for lack of transaction flow, and then how the scammer offered to create that flow by transferring money into his account. He emphasized, "At first, I thought I could get the loan, but as soon as I got this 500,000 yuan, I realized it was suspicious. Who helps someone like that for free? It had to be a scam, so I came to report it." The officers listened, stunned. One, about to take a sip of tea, nearly spilled it. These scams keep getting stranger. They actually send money to create transaction flow. If this gets out, people will think we've lost our grip on reality. "I've handled all kinds of fraud. online job scams, impersonating public security and judicial officers, but I've never heard of a scam where the scammer transfers money to the victim," another officer muttered, scratching his head. "Their thinking is just bizarre." A female officer organizing files dropped everything on the floor and stared. "Are these scammers confused, or do they think people are that gullible?" she asked. The service hall buzzed with confusion as they confirmed details with Lin Yang. Meanwhile, back where Zhang Ping waited, the mood was very different. After transferring the money, Zhang Ping paced the room, checking his phone over and over. He waited for news from Lin Yang about the 5 million loan, but nothing came. Minutes stretched into an hour, his nerves frayed. He called Lin Yang at last, forcing calm into his voice. "Any progress on the loan?" Lin Yang sounded unhurried. "Don't worry, big brother Zhang. The bank's closed today. My classmate will help me tomorrow morning." Reluctantly reassured, Zhang Ping replied, "Okay, make sure you remember." But the worry didn't leave him. The loan he'd taken from Sheng Ge carried an astronomical daily interest, more than 2,500 yuan per day. If he couldn't repay quickly, interest would pile up into tens of thousands. He grew more anxious by the minute. A sudden, violent kick burst his thoughts. The front door flew open. Before he could react, several police officers stormed in, shouting, "Don't move!" Zhang Ping froze, stunned. They advanced and restrained him expertly. He struggled and shouted, "What are you doing? I didn't break the law." But his protests were ignored. They hauled him out and put him in the police car. Even then, he kept yelling, "What crime? You've got the wrong person." As the car drove away, panic replaced anger. He replayed the last few days and realized, with a cold twist in his gut, that he had probably walked into a trap. Lin Yang's naivete had always seemed like an act. Now it made grim sense. The idea that 500,000 yuan in transaction flow would unlock a 5 million loan may have been the hook Lin Yang used to ensnare him. In an interrogation room, with his hands cuffed to the table and the lamp's pale light making his face look sallow, Zhang Ping felt humiliation and rage boil together. He'd started small, sweet talk, little scams that always worked, and had grown cocky, thinking he could pull people's strings. Now he'd been outplayed by the young man he'd underestimated. He clenched his hands until the veins stood out and cursed himself. Worse than shame was fear of Sheng Ge. Stories of what happened to people who couldn't repay him played in his head. Broken legs, left bleeding in the street. The memory of a man who'd once borrowed from Sheng Ge and been crippled for it made sweat bead on Zhang Ping's forehead. His legs trembled. What could he do? He screamed inwardly. If he couldn't pay, Sheng Ge wouldn't show mercy. A thought flared. Confess everything to the police, admit all his past crimes, and hope for a lighter sentence. Better to be locked up than to be hunted and broken on the streets. If he was sentenced to prison, he might at least be alive. Then doubt followed. Confessing meant harsher legal punishment and a life behind bars. But not confessing might mean something far worse at Sheng Ge's hands. Torn between the two terrors, his eyes went wide with despair. In the end, crushed by pressure, Zhang Ping made up his mind. He would risk everything and tell the police the whole story. At this point, he thought, it was better to gamble on the justice system than to wait for Sheng Ge's collectors to come for him. Chapter 106, No, I'll Go to Jail. Zhang Ping sat in the interrogation room choking on regret, his insides twisting with remorse. He kept cursing himself silently. Why had he been so greedy? The sight of so much money had clouded his judgment, made him overconfident, and in the end had led him straight into Lin Yang's trap. Now he was paying the price. He spilled everything like beans tumbling from a bamboo tube. He told them how, the day he first saw Lin Yang driving a Yangwang U8 through the county, the car's luxury immediately marked him as wealthy and gave Zhang Ping the idea to defraud him. He described how he had painstakingly made a fake tai sui out of silicone, so realistic that anyone who didn't look closely would be fooled. "Wait, where did you get the materials to make the fake tai sui?" the officer asked. "They were processed from prosthetic breasts I found in medical waste." Zhang Ping admitted. The officer immediately regretted asking. The image made him queasy. "Continue." Zhang Ping went on. He'd set up at the entrance to Phoenix Village selling succulents, but it hadn't been about the plants so much as a piece of the scheme. He had taught Lin Yang's father, Lin Weiguo, how to plant succulents, then deliberately inflated the price of peat soil to an absurd degree, 10 times its true value, to push Lin Weiguo into digging for pine needle soil in the pines at Phoenix Ridge. "I must have been possessed," Zhongping muttered, slapping his own face hard, his expression contorted with pain and shame. "I shouldn't have had those crooked thoughts. It was greed that ruined me." His voice broke with sobs and his eyes were glossy with regret as the officer took careful notes. Then, with a serious expression, the officer fixed him with a heavy look and said, "The amount you tried to defraud is large, and the crime is malicious. Under the law, this is attempted fraud." "Will I go to jail?" Zhongping asked. "If the circumstances are serious, yes," the officer replied. The words landed like a bomb. But instead of fear, Zhongping's face lit up with ecstatic relief. A strange glint entered his eyes. To him, jail sounded preferable to the alternative, being hounded by debt collectors like Sheng Ge. In his mind, prison had turned into a refuge. The officer stared, dumbfounded. He had never seen anyone greet the prospect of prison with joy. When the officer collected himself, he tried to be reassuring. "Your situation is actually not that bad. Since no serious consequences happened, this would usually result in a suspended sentence. That means you wouldn't go to jail. You could continue living freely as long as you follow the regulations." Zhongping reacted as if someone had stepped on his tail. No, I don't want a suspended sentence. I want to go to jail," he shouted, voice booming through the room. The officer's disbelief grew. Refusing a suspended sentence? Insisting on prison? He frowned and raised his voice in return. "Sentencing follows legal procedure. It isn't up to you to decide." Zhongping gripped the table so hard his knuckles whitened, sweat pouring down his face. "I want to turn myself in," he blurted. The officer repeated the words slowly, stunned. "Turn yourself in?" Zhongping, as if clutching at one last card, plunged on. "I've always been a fraudster. My earlier scams always worked. I thought I was clever and wouldn't get caught, but I messed up when I met Lin Yang. That's when I got trapped." His voice trembled with a manic excitement as he hurried through his words, desperate to not miss this chance. The officer, initially stunned, now felt a spark of hope. If Zhongping's story was true, it could crack open a whole series of unsolved fraud cases. This confession might be exactly what the station needed. "Tell me everything, every detail," the officer said, composing himself and leaning forward. Zhongping obeyed, again spilling it all out. His usual trick was a classic treasure-hunting con. He'd go to villages with equipment, ask where wealthy families used to live, then set up a modified metal detector, actually a remote-controlled doorbell reworked to beep convincing signals. He'd pretend to be searching for treasure, murmuring to himself to pique the villagers' curiosity. When he reached the place he'd already planted something, he'd make the detector scream and act astonished. "Found it! Found it! There must be treasure here," he'd shout, joining the villagers in digging. They would unearth the gold he had buried in advance. In reality, lead painted to look valuable. Then he'd spin a story about how handling the gold required procedures and connections beyond a stranger's means. He'd offer to mortgage the gold to them, borrow money for a short-term turnover, promising to repay it with interest once the gold was processed. Greedy villagers, seeing a chance to get gold and profit, would hand over their savings. They never knew the gold was worthless. The officer felt a cold shock of recognition. He'd heard of similar scams, people losing thousands, even tens of thousands, to sudden strangers who appeared, then vanished. Because the fraudsters moved on after each hit, the police had struggled to find suspects. If Zhongping's confession was true, this could solve a long-standing problem. Zhongping didn't hold back. He listed his cases one by one, 28 scams in all, totaling over 360,000 yuan. The officer's face brightened. The news was like a gift. Zhongping had voluntarily handed them a stack of cold cases. The officer's excitement was hard to contain. Solving dozens of fraud cases would seriously bump up the station's clearance rate and might even make them the top-performing precinct in the city this year. Promotion, bonuses. The possibilities flashed through his mind like fireworks. For a moment, he had the irrational urge to embrace Zhongping in sheer relief. But the officer kept his focus and his professionalism. He also realized the debt of gratitude owed to Lin Yang. If not for Lin Yang's quick thinking and courage for baiting Zhongping into exposing himself and transferring money, and for reporting it promptly, none of this would have come to light. Lin Yang had pierced the fraud ring cleanly, leaving their crimes exposed. When the case closed, the station would be sure to reward him. A banner might even be put up, "Smart and brave anti-fraud pioneer," proclaimed for everyone in the force and the community to see. Chapter 107. The three of them returned to the provincial capital together. Lin Yang had been called away suddenly by family matters last time, and the next few days were a blur of tidying things up. He hadn't seen Chen Qingqing during that time. Now that most of the issues were settled, he finally had free time to spend with her. After reporting to the police, he drove to the county town. Chen Qingqing was already waiting at the agreed spot. They walked together to the small restaurant near the school. The place had been there since their student days. Back then, the school's food had always been mediocre, but this little restaurant had felt like a culinary treasure to them. Lin Yang was surprised to find it still standing nearly 10 years later. Seeing the familiar storefront, they went in without hesitation to check whether the food still matched their memories. He found a place to park and they stepped inside. "Hey, why are all the shop signs on this street green?" Chen Qingqing suddenly pointed at the row of signs above them with a wry tone. "This whole aesthetic, I don't know what the people behind it were thinking. Even the fire station has been painted green." Lin Yang looked up. Every shop sign along the street had been standardized, green backgrounds with white characters, all the same size. Even the fire station's once white wall with red stripes had been repainted in white and green, which looked oddly out of place. He grinned inwardly. It was the kind of vanity project that always stirred public dissatisfaction. If someone could leverage that discontent, the backer propping up Duweng might be exposed. Without that backing, Duweng would fall, and the future trouble would be much easier to handle. Still, Duwengi would have to pay a price first. He pulled out his phone and called little uncle. He told him to move into the new house right away, and to put the old house on the market at 10 times its usual asking price. Lin Yang was counting on the idea that Du Wenge would be desperate enough to pay anything for the treasure hidden beneath the house. Little uncle promised to move the next day, and the listing was posted that very evening. They stepped into the restaurant. The layout and decor hadn't changed much. Simple tables and chairs, yellowed photos on the walls that kept the past alive. They took a window seat and a waiter handed them menus. Lin Yang blinked when he looked down. "Wow, the prices have really gone up," he said. 10 years ago, a meat dish was 3 yuan and a vegetable one was 1.5. Now meat dishes are 30 and vegetable dishes 15, exactly 10 times. The owner came over with a forced smile. "What can I do? Everything's expensive now. Rent, ingredients, labor. My margin was thin to begin with. I barely keep the doors open. You're old customers. I won't lie to you." Lin Yang and Chen Qingqing exchanged looks, both feeling a little wistful. Chen Qingqing sighed. "It's really hard to make a living these days. In the city, I'm on edge all the time. The pressure wears you down. Coming back to this county town makes me feel so much calmer." She paused, then added, "I'm planning to stay a bit longer. I'll go back after the Qingming festival." "If that's the case, stay and get some rest," Lin Yang said. "You've been running yourself ragged. This is a good chance to relax." They ordered and reminisced about their school days. Under the filter of time, the old stories all seemed softer, sweeter. When the dishes arrived, he took a bite. The flavors were slightly different from what he remembered. Maybe the ingredients or the cooking had changed. But being there with Chen Qingqing, eating familiar yet unfamiliar food, felt rare and satisfying. His phone buzzed. It was Hu Qian. Lin Yang thought she might call about the stock market, but the conversation left him pleasantly surprised. "Lin Yang," Hu Qian said on the line, her voice bright with anticipation, "do you remember what I told you before? Lin Shi, my good friend, and I plan to go to Shaanxi for Qingming. Qingming is in 3 days. Send me your hometown address. We'll come by and visit." Lin Yang blinked. He'd assumed Hu Qian and her friend had been joking, but they were serious. Well, if they were coming, he would make sure they were entertained. He looked across the table at Chen Qingqing, and an idea formed. When he returned from the trip, he would bring Chen Qingqing along. That way, she'd have company on the journey and someone to look after her, which would put his mind at ease. Chen Qingqing's outgoing personality would likely get along well with Hu Qian and Lin Shi anyway. Chapter 108, Green. Lin Yang, Hu Qian, on the other end of the line, called his name softly when she got no answer. Lin Yang blinked and replied, "Of course I remember. Did you mean it, or were you joking?" "Of course I mean it. I've never been to Xiangxi. The scenery is one thing, but I'm most interested in their corpse driving. I heard they used to have corpse inns up in the mountains, right?" Hu Qian's voice was full of excitement and a childlike hunger for the mysterious. Lin Yang smiled ruefully. She'd clearly been fed too many TV dramas, and patiently explained, "There are legends about corpse driving in Xiangxi, and yes, there used to be corpse inns in stories. But that's all history now. In modern times, there's no more corpse driving, so there aren't any real corpse inns." He could almost hear Hu Qian's disappointed laugh. "Did I say something wrong? There really aren't any at all. There used to be, but they were destroyed in the wars. Now, if you want to see anything like that, it's only in performances." "That'll do. Then I'll come watch a performance. I'll leave on the night of Qingming and get there the next morning. Can you help me get a couple of tickets?" "Sure." He hung up, and Chen Qingqing, who had been listening, looked at him as if she wanted to say something, but held back. Lin Yang beat her to it. "That was Hu Qian, my stock advisor. She and some friends want to come see corpse driving in Xiangxi. I just need to get them 2 tickets for the Charm of Xiangxi performance." Chen Qingqing made a small, disappointed sound and lost all the earlier enthusiasm. "What's wrong?" Lin Yang asked, puzzled. He hadn't meant to upset her. "You haven't taken me out to play since I got here," she pouted, half playful, half hurt. Lin Yang frowned, about to remind her that she had lived here before, when he saw the gleeful, slightly indignant expression on her face and realized he'd walked into something. Chen Qingqing bit her lip, thinking privately, "Do I care about the show? I care that he's taking other women out and not me." She didn't say that aloud. Instead, she asked, "You're not taking them to your house for dinner, right?" "No, they've got their own plans. I'll just take them to the performance." Cheng Qing's mood lifted immediately. A smile bloomed. She brightened, chatted closely with him, and teased him until the atmosphere relaxed. Lin Yang, baffled by how quickly she'd shifted, smiled faintly and accepted that a girl's mind could be hard to read. After dinner, the sky flared in sunset. The river town bathed in orange-red light. Lin Yang and Chen Qingqing walked side by side toward the Tuojiang. A cool breeze chased away the day's heat. They strolled along the stone path by the river. Chen Qingqing sometimes pointed out a lovely view with childlike delight, sometimes slipped into companionable silence and enjoyed the warmth of being together. Lin Yang listened and answered with a few gentle remarks. Night came and the crowds thinned until it was just the two of them. Lin Yang checked the time and said softly, "It's getting late. I'll walk you back to the hotel. Get a good rest tomorrow." Chen Qingqing nodded, reluctant but sensible. They walked slowly, laughing as if they had 1,000 things to say. At the hotel entrance, Lin Yang stopped. "Rest well. Call me if you need anything." Chen Qingqing looked up. Her eyes glistened as if with unshed tears. She nodded emphatically. "You be careful too. Message me when you get home." He promised and left. She watched his figure fade into the night before she turned and went inside. At home, Lin Yang washed up and lay on his bed, idly scrolling his phone. He paused at a string of news items about Fenghuang County. Snow King turned green. Whose heart did it freeze? In the photos, the Snow King logo, once red and white, had been replaced by a green and white scheme that looked absurd. Netizens piled into the comment sections. "Snow King has been completely greened. How will it survive in the milk tea market?" someone joked. Other headlines blared. Fenghuang County bans red, blue, and black signs. Red cross becomes green cross. Authorities say signs must be unconventional. Shocking. Uniform signs go green hat. What do you think? Each article showed images of once bright shop signs reduced to monotone green backgrounds with white characters. Neat but somehow wrong. Even the fire department's bold red emblem had been changed to green, which struck many as comical. Comments ranged from angry, This is ridiculous. They've ruined the city's character and wasted taxpayers' money, to bemused. This aesthetic is unmatched. I feel like I'm going to turn green from anxiety. A few urged calm and demanded an official explanation. The stories were getting attention, but only within a limited circle. They hadn't yet broken into wider public discourse. Lin Yang realized that, at this scale, trying to take down Du Weng's backer was impossible. He wanted to turn this into something bigger, spark public outrage until the backer was completely exposed and unable to interfere anymore. To do that, he needed reach. Buying ad boosts on Douyin was the fastest route. He opened every related video he could find, tapped the share button, and selected the Douyu Plus Boost to Hot option. On the ad settings page, he chose play count as the goal, picked the longest available duration so the clips would stay visible, and trusted system smart placement to find the right audience. When it came to budget, he didn't hesitate and entered 10,000 yuan for each placement. It wasn't likely to be more than a drop in the ocean, but he was willing to spend. He completed one payment after another, each click making him a little more determined. As he worked, he thought, Du Wenge, do you think you can do whatever you want because you've got a backer? This time, I'll make you pay. When he finished the last placement, he leaned back against the headboard and exhaled. Now there was nothing to do but wait and watch the storm of public opinion build. Chapter 109, The Police Are Here. Fenghuang County, a small county town in western Hunan. In the county chief's bright, spacious office, a wisp of steam rose from the teacup on his desk, carrying the faint scent of tea. His gaze lingered on a report about the town's urban renovation. He frowned slightly, set the paper down, leaned back, and fell into thought. To build an international college-style county town, it needs a brand new look. We have to change these colors, he murmured. Images of glossy boulevards in foreign cities floated through his mind, and he convinced himself he had found the key to elevating the town's image. Without much research or consultation, a regulation quietly took shape. Red, blue, and black were to be banned from storefronts and public signage. The order was issued quickly. Urban enforcement officers were instructed to notify merchants one by one to change their signboard colors. At first, there was a lot of grumbling. Merchants were baffled but dared not openly protest. Why can't we use these three colors? Our signs have been this way for years. Suddenly asking us to change them is just making trouble, complained the owner of a restaurant. Changing a sign costs a lot, added the neighbor who ran a stationery store. Business is already rough. Now we've got another expense. Still, most people complied with the administrative order. Within days, the once colorful streets became monotonous. Green dominated. Snow King's iconic red and white sign was painted green and white, looking oddly out of place. The fire department's boldly red emblem was repainted green, drawing snickers. The county chief was pleased. He strolled through the streets, inspecting the uniform color scheme with a slight smile. He felt he was bringing an unprecedented transformation to the town. Soon it would be a distinctive international small city. The next morning, sunlight slanted through the blinds onto his desk. As usual, he lifted his teacup, sipped tea, and reached for the newspaper when an impatient knock broke the silence. "Come in," he called, setting the paper aside. His assistant, Xiao Lu, rushed in, face pale with worry. "Sir, it's bad." The county chief scowled. "How many times have I told you not to rush in like that? If it weren't for your uncle being my old teacher, I wouldn't have hired you." Xiao Lu took a steadying breath. "Sir, the internet is full of news about our ban on red, blue, and black." The chief waved his hand dismissively. "Let them chatter. What can a bunch of keyboard warriors do?" He had seen a few short videos himself and thought the issue trivial. But Xiao Liu's expression only grew more urgent. "This is different. The videos are getting massive engagement, and some have gone viral beyond their usual circles. Look." He handed over his phone and scrolled. The green Snow King. Who's left in its heart? One clip showed Snow King's sign in green. It had 175,000 likes and 69,000 comments. The fire department turned green like a post office, read another caption. 68,000 likes, 11,000 comments. The comments were everywhere. The users' locations spread across the country. Netizens and media were harshly critical. The county chief's face reddened as anger rose. Who's stoking this? Who's behind it? It's not just the videos, Xiao Lu said, playing another trending clip. The ban is topping search lists. People have dug up your past statements. On the screen, the chief himself was explaining, I want a collegiate international style. Red represents fire and stirs people up. Blue is vulgar. Black has funeral connotations. That's why these three colors are prohibited. The clip had 1.23 million likes and 860,000 comments, most of them mocking or speculating. Is he following feng shui advice? One comment read. Maybe it clashes with his zodiac year, another said. How will they handle traffic lights? Someone else asked. The chief realized the storm had grown beyond his control. Get these videos taken down, now, he ordered. Outside the county seat, morning calm was shattered by a sharp siren slicing through the village. People spilled from their homes, curious and worried, whispering about why a police car had appeared. What's happening? Why is a police car here? An old man grumbled, brows knitted in concern. Maybe someone lost something, a young man guessed. Who would bother stealing nowadays? Everything's electronic and traceable. I think someone did something serious, an old woman said, frowning. Let's follow and see, someone suggested, and a crowd began to trail the police car, keeping a respectful distance, but moving with determined curiosity. The police car rolled into Lin Yang's yard and parked. Officers stepped out and the crowd gathered at the gate. An old woman pushed through and called out, Comrade, what are you doing here? Chapter 110. I'm afraid you'll have a hard life, and I'm also afraid you'll drive a Land Rover. Ma'am, is this Lin Yang's house? The police officer asked politely. The woman nodded, confusion flickering across her face. Yes, this is Lin Yang's house. Coming so early to look for him, has he done something wrong? Around them, the neighbors began to murmur. A sharp, accusatory voice rose from the crowd. I knew it. Lin Yang's family used to be dirt poor. He goes away to study for a few years and suddenly comes back rich. Where did that money come from? Exactly, another agreed. Maybe he's involved in some shady business. The police finally came to pay him a visit. Rumors multiplied. He's been hanging out with questionable people. Maybe he's running a pyramid scheme and scamming folks. Or smuggling. Who knows? Voices grew louder and angrier, eyes full of suspicion. The officer's face darkened. Everyone, stop guessing wildly. Lin Yang is a law-abiding citizen. He didn't do any of that. I'm actually here to present him with a banner and a bonus. A banner and a bonus? An old man's eyes widened until his mouth nearly dropped open. No way. So we were all wrong? The woman who had spoken earlier flushed with embarrassment, wishing she could sink through the floor. Those who'd been the most maliciously certain bowed their heads, ashamed. Heads hung low as neighbors muttered regrets to themselves. How could they have jumped to conclusions so quickly? The courtyard fell into an awkward quiet, broken only by a few birdsong. Lin Yang, roused by the commotion, pushed back the curtains and went to the window. Seeing the police car and the ring of neighbors, he recognized many of them, some distant relatives among them, and thought bitterly, this is what they mean by being afraid you'll have a hard life and afraid you'll drive a Land Rover. He dressed quickly and went downstairs. Stepping into the yard, he took in the scene, the officer smiling as he approached, a small banner and an envelope in hand. Hello, are you Lin Yang? We're here to present you with a banner and a reward, the officer said. He handed the banner and the envelope to Lin Yang. The banner read in bold characters, smart and brave, pioneer in fighting fraud. What happened, officer? Lin Yang asked, puzzled. It's like this, the officer explained. Yesterday, you reported that someone had scammed you out of 500,000. We opened a case right away and arrested the suspect, Zhang Ping. He confessed. Turns out he's responsible for 28 cases involving a huge sum. Solving this case raised our station's clearance rate significantly. The chief approved the banner and the reward and asked me to deliver them this morning. Lin Yang was surprised. He hadn't expected the suspect to be involved in so many crimes. It was the right thing to do, he said modestly. I didn't think you'd go through this much trouble. Thank you. The officer smiled. You did the right thing. Risking personal safety to outsmart a fraudster sets an example for the community. The neighbors' expressions shifted from suspicion to admiration. Those who'd just been whispering accusations looked mortified, eyes downcast. Then someone broke the silence with praise. Lin Yang, I always thought you were a promising young man. You'll go far. Yeah, look at you. You're an upright, decent person. You've brought honor to our village. If anything good happens, don't forget us, another called. Their sudden flattery made Lin Yang feel contemptuous. He knew their change of heart wasn't sincere, but driven by herd mentality and self-interest. In a small village where people's circles are fixed and information travels slowly, fear and gossip can spread fast, and few bother to look for the truth. His mind wandered back to childhood memories of neighbors helping one another, harvesting together, lending a hand when someone was sick. There had been warmth and a sense of family. But as the outside world prospered and young people left for work, material pursuits hardened relationships. The simple, honest community feeling had faded. Clearing his throat, he put on a polite smile. Uncles, aunts, everyone. We're neighbors. If anything happens, let's help each other. I hope our village keeps getting better and everyone can live well. The villagers nodded, some still awkward, but at least outwardly reconciled. After the crowd gradually dispersed, Lin Yang went back inside. Just as he sat down, his phone rang. It was little uncle. Xiao Yang, his uncle's hearty voice said, that moving company you found was really reliable. They were efficient and did a great job. We finished moving. I left the old house key in the crack of the doorstep. You can pick it up when you have time. After he hung up, Lin Yang smiled to himself. It would be the perfect chance to go to the old house, dig up the treasure buried there, and then sell the rundown place to Du Weng. He imagined Du Weng's face when he bought the house and found the treasure gone, and the smile playing at the corner of his mouth widened. Grandma and little uncle had already moved into the new house. The old family home stood empty. It had been built by Lin Yang's parents for his grandparents years ago. Because they'd built two houses at once, their own place never got renovated and had sat undecorated for decades. With Grandma and little uncle moved out, they'd handed the keys to Lin Yang and told him to handle whatever needed handling. Little uncle had posted a notice about selling the place and, at Lin Yang's insistence, made sure the message would get to Du Weng. The phone number on the ad was Lin Yang's, but so far no one had called. He couldn't tell whether Du Weng had seen it, though he was certain that, given the chance for a big profit, Du Weng would spend whatever it took to secure the house and avoid trouble. First, though, the treasure said to be buried under the storage room had to be dug out. He parked a short distance from Grandma's new place and walked to the old house. The outer walls were blotchy and flaking, patches of dull gray brick showing through. The wood window frames were rotted, the glass smeared with dust so thick it blurred the rooms inside. Roof tiles sat unevenly, some chipped, a few gone altogether, exposing the black felt underneath. On one side of the house was a makeshift storage room. Through the stained window, Lin Yang could see a jumble of useless things, old tables and chairs, discarded farm tools, a cracked water vat. Everything was heaped together in disorder. Following little uncle's directions, Lin Yang knelt at the main hall doorstep and fumbled in the crack. A moment later, his fingers found cold metal and a small smile tugged at his lips. With the key, he went to the storage room door, fitted it, and opened it. The hinges complained, and a stale, earthy smell rolled out. The floor of the room wasn't cement. It was packed earth, soft underfoot. He glanced around and mentally checked the details he'd been given. The landlord had buried the box under this storage room. He dug a hoe out of the pile of junk, hefted it, and brought it down. The blade sank into the soil with a muffled thud. He gripped the handle with both hands and flipped up a heavy clod. Fresh, damp earth smelled a little rank, and several ants scattered from the torn clump. Lin Yang ignored them and kept at it, swinging the hoe again and again. Sweat beaded on his forehead and ran down his face, disappearing into the dust at his feet. Then a sharp clank sounded from below. He froze, pulse jumping. Tossing the hoe aside, he plunged his hands into the loose earth and dug by feel. After a few scoops, he eased out a small object. He held it up, eager, then his grin faded. It was a tiny crab, no bigger than a baby's palm. Its body a peculiar pink, claws and legs black as ink, eyes like dull white pebbles. The workmanship was crude, nothing like the precious thing he'd imagined. "What is this?" he muttered, disappointed. The intelligence had said the treasure was in a box. He shrugged and dropped the little crab into his pocket, thinking perhaps it had been a child's toy accidentally buried years ago. He rested, then went back to digging. The report had said the box was buried about 50 centimeters down. To be safe, he planned to dig to 60. He kept at it, relying on the fitness he'd gotten from regular exercise to push through the fatigue. The storage room was small. After hours of effort, most of it had been turned over. By mid-afternoon, exhausted, he plopped down on a clod and panted. His clothes were soaked with sweat, clinging to him, hair stuck to his forehead. Just then, another clank came from outside. Lin Yang's body tensed. He slipped into the shadow by the window and peered through the dusty glass. A thin man was skulking around the house, eyes darting, steps light as if trying to avoid notice. He circled and paused often, peering into corners and muttering to himself. After a long while he left, disappearing down the lane. Lin Yang watched him go, a wary knot of unease forming in his chest. The man's furtive manner suggested he might be working for Du Weng. Du Weng had long coveted the old house and had even pushed little uncle to marry him off to his foolish daughter. If his advances had been rebuffed, he might well be up to something now. If Grandma and little uncle had still been living here, they could have been in danger. He checked the time. It was after 4, and the light was falling. If it got dark, the unlit storage room would be dangerous, and the digging would become nearly impossible. He forced himself to stand, shouldered the hoe, and went back to work with renewed determination. One swing after another, his movements steadier, stronger, heaped to one side. Then, as the blade struck in a corner, it rang against something solid with a dull thud. His heart leaped. This time it felt like it had to be the box. Chapter 1 and 12, Mysterious Ancient Books. He held the hoe and carefully dug away the surrounding soil. Lin Yang worked hard to clear all the dirt from around the box. The box had been wrapped in craft paper, but the paper was torn and the iron box beneath was exposed. He scraped the remaining craft paper off the surface and found the metal already pitted with rust. Some areas had corroded so thin they looked as if they might give way at any moment. Kneeling at the edge of the pit, he wrapped his hands around the box and tried to pull it free. It was unexpectedly heavy. His forearms strained and sweat beaded on his forehead, but the box wouldn't budge. Abandoning the idea of dragging it out intact, he decided to open it and remove the contents piece by piece. There was a lock on the box. Lin Yang raised the shovel and slammed it down. With a bang, the lock snapped. He lifted the lid and a blinding gleam shot out from inside, forcing him to squint. When his eyes adjusted, he stared in astonishment. Dozens of gold bars, each about as long and thick as a finger, lay neatly arranged, their surfaces gleaming. Each bar must have weighed at least 100 grams. At current prices, one was worth around 70 to 80,000 yuan. The gold alone was easily worth several million yuan. Beside the bars were dozens of jade bracelets, cool and smooth to the touch, a vivid green with clear, natural patterns, clearly high quality. There were also round pearls of uniform size, glowing softly like stars. Scattered among them were exquisite jade pendants, ancient bronze mirrors, gem-encrusted jewelry. The box was packed full. Even though Lin Yang's net worth now exceeded $1 billion, his heart still raced at the sight. Any one of those items would fetch a fortune. He picked up a gold bar. The weight in his hand made the power of wealth tangible. The gold was smooth and cool. A strange joy rose in him. He examined a jade bracelet and marveled at its deep, dripping green, imagining the market value of the hoard. He set to work, swiftly and carefully packing the treasures into bags he had brought. There were too many to carry in one trip. He planned to shuttle them to the car in stages. He moved quickly, glancing constantly back at the open box, until finally the last piece had been bagged and the box was empty. As he stood to leave the dirty, debris-strewn pit and carry the loot to the car, something about the empty box caught his eye. Looking from the inside, the bottom seemed shallower than when viewed from the outside. The discrepancy was subtle, but unmistakable. Lin Yang's curiosity was piqued. Could there be a hidden compartment? He thought. What might be inside it? He flipped the box over onto the ground and inspected the bottom closely. He tapped the metal, listening for any hollow sounds. Each tap quickened his pulse. Then he noticed a faint seam in one corner. Running his finger along it, he found it slightly wider and looser than the rest. He pressed hard on the iron sheet there and felt it move. Excited, he applied more pressure. With a click, a panel lifted and a hidden compartment revealed itself. Inside lay a yellowed ancient book. Its cover was badly worn, and the pages looked so fragile they might crumble at a touch. The title had long since faded. Only a few indistinct strokes remained. The book's careful concealment suggested it might be worth more than the visible treasure combined. Lin Yang reached out with caution, mindful that any mistake could ruin its value. A faint musty scent rose as he lifted it. The paper had a unique texture, neither ordinary Schwann paper nor modern stock, but something he had never seen. The pages were a deep, dark yellow, as if scorched by time. Every crease and browned corner spoke of long years. A thrill ran through him. He knew little about ancient manuscripts, but instinct told him this was no ordinary volume. Carefully, hands trembling a little, he turned the first page. He froze. The characters were bizarre and unreadable. No modern script he recognized. This was a job for experts. Gently, he closed the book and tucked it back into the hidden compartment. He would first load the treasures into the car, then take the book home and find someone who could research its origin. Chapter 113, I Don't Want Others to Know. Lin Yang made several trips, carrying as many black plastic bags as he could manage from the excavated iron chest to his car. By the time he finished, the trunk and the back seat were crammed full. The tires sagged noticeably under the weight. It was obvious how many treasures had been unearthed. He couldn't help but marvel at how wealthy the old landlord's family must have been. What had been hidden away was priceless, and what they had taken with them must have been beyond measure. He didn't leave immediately. Lin Yang returned to the old Yang family residence, went into the utility room, and carefully restored the excavated area to its original condition. He even took the iron chest away and wiped out any trace of disturbance. By the time he got home, it was already dark. He parked in the courtyard, shut the iron gate, and began hauling the bags into the house. Because they were black plastic, there was no worry about anyone seeing that they contained valuables. When everything was stacked in his room, he was exhausted. He collapsed onto the bed and sat there panting for a long while before sitting up again. From under the bed, he took out the ancient book. He opened it carefully, then photographed a single corner with his phone. The only person he would send it to was Lin Bian, the owner of Xiangchun, the largest antique shop in Xing City. Lin Bian had once paid him top price for an antique, partly out of gratitude to Chen Qingqing, who had helped him, and Lin Yang had felt that he could be trusted. More important, Lin Bian seemed to have deep pockets and connections. After all, not many people could casually produce a check for 400 million. Somebody like that wouldn't be swayed by petty gain. Lin Yang didn't know the book's true value, and if it was extremely valuable, he didn't want to risk any temptation. He didn't send a full photo, only a corner. Far away at the Qingshuitang Antique Market in Xing City, Lin Bian was sitting in the back courtyard of his shop, leisurely sipping tea and enjoying a rare moment of quiet. His phone rang, and he glanced at the image. For a moment, the teacup slipped in his hand. His face changed, eyes widening, and he was frozen as if nailed to the spot. He stared at the screen, brows knitting, shock and disbelief written all over him. After a long pause, he finally steadied himself and typed, fingers shaking just a little, "Who else knows you have this besides you?" Lin Yang saw the message and felt a jolt. He had already suspected the book was no ordinary find, but Lin Bian's reaction confirmed it. He answered truthfully, "Only I know, no one else." The reply came quickly. "Good, don't tell anyone, and make sure this book never appears in public. Otherwise, it will bring endless trouble to your life." Endless trouble? Lin Yang's mind flashed to the wuxia novels he'd read. When a top cultivation manual or legendary weapon surfaced, rivers of blood followed. One faction after another came to fight over it. If this ancient book was that kind of thing, anyone who learned of it would come after it at all costs. He had known the book was important since he first found the hidden compartment, but he hadn't expected it to be so dangerous. "Why?" Lin Yang typed. "It's not convenient to discuss online," Lin Bian answered. "Come to my shop when you can, and we'll talk in person." Lin Bian's caution told Lin Yang everything he needed to know. This book's value was far higher than he'd imagined. He stowed the book back into a box under the bed, suppressing his curiosity for the moment. Next, Lin Yang photographed the rest of the haul: the gold, the jade bracelets, the other treasures, organized the pictures, and sent them to Lin Bian with a message asking whether he'd buy them. By then, Lin Bian hadn't fully recovered from the shock of the book. The new message brought him back down to business. He studied the photos of the jewelry and artifacts, and despite years in the trade and seeing countless rare pieces, his expression brightened with surprise and excitement. The gold had a pure, natural luster. The jade bracelets were warm and finely worked. Every item radiated quality at a glance. "I'll acquire them all," he replied. "These are genuinely rare pieces. Send me an address. I'll set off tonight and be there early tomorrow morning." Lin Yang blinked. As the owner of the largest antique shop in Xing City, Lin Bian had seen everything. For him to rush overnight meant these items were truly exceptional. Lin Yang had only wanted the book appraised and had no wish to shuttle back and forth to the provincial capital. But with Lin Bian coming himself, the answer to what that ancient book was would come in less than a day. Chapter 114. I'm angry, but I can't do anything about him. The next morning, Lin Yang was woken by his phone. He assumed it was Lin Bian, the antique dealer, so he answered without thinking. A gruff voice came through. "Is that house of yours for sale?" Lin Yang froze, then remembered his number had been left on the ad for the Yang family old house. He suspected it was Du Wenge calling. The voice fit his image of a brick factory boss, coarse and blunt. "Yes, who's this?" he asked. "Never mind who I am," the man snapped. "I want that old house. Name your price." There was an eagerness in the other man's tone, like someone afraid of losing a rare catch. 5 million, the caller blurted. Lin Yang smiled inwardly. The old house sat on the outskirts of Fenghuang County, a self-built place worth at most a few tens of thousands in reality. New elevator flats downtown went for 200,000 to 300,000 each. Ordinarily, no one would want such a place. It would sit empty until it rotted. But Lin Yang had good reason to quote a ridiculous sum. He knew Du Wenge had heard about the valuables buried beneath the house. Under that temptation, Du would be willing to overpay. On the other end, Du Wenge was stunned. Ever since word of treasures under the Yang family house got out, he'd been scheming to get it quietly. He'd tried coercion, pressuring Yang Feng to marry his daughter so they could renovate and dig without attracting attention, but the plan had failed. Now, unexpectedly, the house was up for sale. It was an opportunity he couldn't waste. He'd expected to buy the place for tens of thousands. 5 million was an insult. "What the hell? Your broken house isn't worth 5 million ghost coins," he barked. 6 million, Lin Yang said coolly. Du Weng sputtered. He'd rashly shown his temper and hung up, then smashed his phone against the wall. It shattered. He kicked over a chair and hurled curses, sweeping everything from the table to the floor. Teacups shattered. After the outburst, he sank onto the sofa, breathing hard. As he calmed, reason returned. The situation was delicate. Too much fuss would bring attention. If the whole thing became public and someone investigated, the buried items would be exposed and could be seized. Buying the house cleanly was still the safest option. But he couldn't just swallow the loss quietly. "Those things aren't mine to give away," he muttered to himself. "Once I get the items, I'll have my people handle it. He won't even know what hit him." He stared at the broken phone fragments, then found a spare handset in a drawer. He held it, took a breath, and tried to settle his anger. His mind replayed the memory of the man on the line, the humiliation of being outwitted. Worse, his political backing was crumbling. Fenghuang County's recent ban on red, blue, and black had ignited a national uproar, and the fallout would likely claim officials in the next few days. When his patron fell, Du would lose protection. He needed the house and its contents settled quietly before anything else blew up. Hands still shaking, he dialed the number from the ad. As the call connected, his heart hammered with a mix of fury and humiliation. Furious that he had to beg, humiliated to be the one begging while being ripped off. He listened for the voice on the other end, every syllable making him more nervous about saying the wrong thing and accidentally driving the price up again. Chapter 115. Xiaodu Duweng had called more than a dozen times. Each time the call was hung up. Furious but helpless, he kept dialing. Just when he was about to give up, Lin Yang's voice finally came through, lazy and arrogant. "Who is it? So noisy." The tone made Duwengi feel like a minor annoyance. Hearing that voice reignited his anger, but he forced it down and pasted a fawning smile on his face, useless, since the other end couldn't see it. "It's me, little Du. I want to buy your house. Can the price come down a bit?" His voice trembled. He wanted the price lowered, but he feared refusal. Lin Yang chuckled. In such a short time, Du Weng had gone from buyer to little Du. He sounded like someone who knew when to bend. 8 million, Lin said decisively, leaving no room for bargaining. Each time Du Weng had tried to haggle, Lin kept raising the price by 1 million. Those 4 words landed on him like a bomb. His smile froze. His face twitched. Disbelief and despair filled his eyes. This is too much of an increase," Duwenga blurted, pleading. "Didn't we agree on 5 million? How did it jump to 8? He ran his hand through his hair as if that could ease the pain. "Take it or leave it," Lin said impatiently. "My house is scarce. Lots of people want it. If you don't buy it, others will jump at it." He snorted deliberately, signaling his firmness. Duwengja felt his regret spike. He wanted to slap himself. "I'm such an idiot," he muttered under his breath. "Why did I bargain? I had a 5 million house and I talked it up to 8. He wanted to turn back time, but it was too late. For the treasure beneath that house, he had to swallow the insult and meet Lin's demand. "Fine. 8 million, he said through gritted teeth. "But you must guarantee we sign the contract today, otherwise—" "Otherwise what?" Lin cut him off coldly. "If the money's ready, we can sign any time. But I'm busy. If you're late, I won't have time to see you." The menace in Lin's voice made Duweng shiver. He dared not say another word. He was at a disadvantage and could only be led. He discussed the signing place politely, then hung up and slumped onto the sofa, staring at the ceiling, furious and helpless. He had never imagined that after years of scraping by in the world, he could be played like this. "Let him be arrogant one more day," he vowed, clenching his fists. "Once I have the house and find the treasure, I'll make him regret it." At 11 in the morning, in a tea house outside the county's largest mall, Lin Yang sat sipping tea and scrolling his phone, waiting for Du Wenge to arrive to sign the contract. The ban on red, blue, and black advertising backgrounds in Fenghuang County had exploded online. Videos had racked up millions of likes. Everyone had jumped on the bandwagon to repost and amplify the story. Lin tapped a clip about an official result. Advertising signboards with red, blue, or black backgrounds banned. The main responsible person in Fenghuang County has been dismissed. He opened the report and froze when he saw a familiar name among the dismissed, the name of Duwenge's backer. The higher-ups had been furious about the fallout and had sacked the top leader. Lin felt a mixture of triumph and worry. He had spent weeks stoking this fire online, steering public opinion to force exactly this result. Now the plan had worked. Duwenge's backer was gone, removing a future threat and weakening Duwenge's support. But if Duwenge was implicated, could he still come up with 8 million? The thought made Lin pause. Still, he felt a private satisfaction. The man behind Duwenge had been a real troublemaker, and now he was gone. A faint smile touched Lin's lips. He set his cup down and took another calm sip, just as someone pushed through the tea house door. Duwenge filled the doorway, broad-shouldered, round at the middle, his belly jutting out like a pot. With every step, his flesh trembled. A thick, shiny gold chain hung at his throat, glittering under the lights like a display of wealth rather than jewelry. He was unshaven, his hair greasy, wearing a tight floral shirt with bulging buttons, trousers pulled tight over his belly, and loafers. A man in his 50s trying to look fashionable. He drew stares. "This crappy place, killing me to find it," he bellowed as he entered. The tea house's quiet fractured. Patrons frowned, and those who recognized him turned away, some making a wide berth. He swaggered to a table and sat with a creak, then took out his phone to make a call. At that moment, Lin Yang's phone rang. Duwenge's eyes went blank. His grip tightened so hard his knuckles whitened. He had pictured his tormentor as an old fox of the same world, not this young man. Anger flared, humiliation that screamed like a slap. "This brat, how dare he trick me?" he seethed inwardly. Beneath the anger was helplessness. He knew he was trapped. For the sake of the treasure under that house, he had to swallow his pride, even if the other party was a young punk. He took a deep breath, smoothed his expression, forced an awkward smile, and walked over to Lin Yang. His heart churned, but he knew the deal had to continue. Losing his temper now would only make him more vulnerable. Chapter 116, Deal Done, Arrested. Duwengi forced his expression into calm and approached Lin Yang. "Hello, are you the one selling the house?" "Yes, let's sign the contract," Lin Yang replied. He handed Duwengi a contract. It had been drafted by Shijia and left no loopholes. Shijia had also told Lin Yang about the progress of the Refund 1, Compensate 3 lawsuit. It had already been filed, and the hearing would be held soon. Lin Yang realized then how difficult it would be to obtain that compensation. Even with a top lawyer, it would take effort, an eye-opening reminder of how hard it is for ordinary people to defend their rights. Duwenga took the contract, skimmed it, and seeing nothing major, signed. Then he slowly reached into his coat pocket, his movements almost painfully deliberate, every action betraying his reluctance. His hand fumbled inside his pocket as if making one last struggle. At last, he drew out a check and stared at it as though it were a piece of himself being cut away. His fingers trembled as he handed the check to Lin Yang. The instant he offered it, his hand instinctively recoiled, as though resisting the transaction. "This is 8 million yuan, he muttered, voice thick with pain and unwillingness. His features distorted with anguish. A deep furrow formed between his brows, his eyes full of resentment. Lin Yang took the check, examined it, and found it genuine, an 8 million yuan bank check. He stood up without delay. He didn't want to risk anything going wrong. He went to the bank on the mall's first floor, cashed the check, and deposited the money into his account. Only then did he feel some relief. No sooner had Lin Yang left than several police officers stormed into the tea house and walked straight to Duwenge. The lead officer looked stern and proclaimed loudly, "Duwenge, you have been reported on suspicion of intentional injury, extortion, deliberate wage arrears, and forced labor. You are under arrest." Duwenge's face drained of color. His eyes went wide with shock and disbelief. He reflexively tried to stand and run, but the officers held him down, pinning his shoulders. "Why are you arresting me? This is a misunderstanding," he shouted, struggling, his jowls wobbling with agitation. The police gave him no time to argue and quickly handcuffed him. 2 officers escorted him, one on each side. His legs went weak, he could barely stand, and was half dragged, half pulled out of the tea house. As they put him into the police car, he screamed hoarsely, "I'm innocent." His shouts did nothing. Growing desperate, he blurted, "Do any of you want to keep your jobs, daring to arrest me? The top leader will fire you all tomorrow." An officer shook his head. Inside, he thought, "Your backer has already been removed. What good is yelling now?" As Lin Yang exited the bank, he happened to see Duwengi being led into the police car. He was surprised at how fast it had happened. With Duwengi's patron gone, the arrest came quickly. Fortunately, his own sale had been completed and the funds deposited just minutes before. He stood at the bank entrance and watched until the police car drove away, then returned to the tea house to wait. Shortly after, Lin Yang received a message from Lin Baian, who had already arrived in Fenghuang County. Lin Yang sent him the tea house's location. Not long after, Lin Baian arrived with an assistant. Although over 50, Lin Baian was tall and upright, his eyes sharp with the shrewdness and experience of a seasoned businessman. He wore a tang suit with its frog buttons carefully done up and carried an antique folding fan painted with a landscape ink scene, which added to his refined air. Lin Yang rose quickly to greet him with a warm smile. "Boss Lin, you're finally here. Please, have a seat." Boss Lin smiled and took the offered seat. After a few polite exchanges, they settled down. The assistant stood quietly to the side, ready to act on any instruction. A waiter came and poured fresh tea for Boss Lin, who blew away the steam, took a small sip, and praised, "Good tea, mellow and rich, with a long, pleasant aftertaste. You have a good eye for places, young Lin." Lin Yang laughed off the compliment. "You flatter me, Boss Lin. I just like a quiet spot. This tea house is ideal for business." They drank and chatted about trivialities, the recent weather, the tea house's tea leaves, keeping the mood relaxed. Lin Yang was eager to get to the antiques, but he knew the importance of easing into business. He noticed Boss Lin's occasional glances at his phone lying on the table, where photos of the antiques were stored. It was clear Boss Lin was looking forward to the appraisal. When the time felt right, Lin Yang set down his cup and grew slightly serious. Boss Lin, I've brought some good items. Please take a look. He handed over his phone, and Boss Lin immediately focused. His eyes scanned the photos, his expression shifting, sometimes a slight frown, sometimes a nod. The assistant produced a notebook and pen, ready to record. This Famille Rose porcelain vase is unquestionably a genuine piece from the Qianlong period of the Qing dynasty, Boss Lin said, pointing to a picture. Look at the Famille Rose palette, vibrant yet soft. The painted floral and bird motifs are lifelike, the lines smooth and natural, the details handled precisely. That's typical Qianlong Famille Rose workmanship. The base mark's characters are strong and evenly spaced, consistent with an imperial kiln of that period. Market price, around 800,000 yuan. The assistant jotted notes rapidly. Lin Yang watched, impressed by Boss Lin's professionalism. He had feared the appraisal would take a long time, but Boss Lin was decisive, authenticating pieces and quoting prices just from photos. Next, Boss Lin picked up the photo of gold bars. After a careful look, he said, high purity, from the craftsmanship and marks, likely Republic of China period. Given current gold prices and collectible value, a 100-gram bar is about 76,000 yuan. 68 bars would total roughly 5.2 million yuan. One by one, Boss Lin appraised the items and called out price estimates. For Lin Yang, who had only known the pieces were valuable in general terms, hearing concrete figures was stunning. In a short time, Boss Lin finished appraising all 169 antiques. The process was smooth and efficient, and when it was done, Lin Yang looked at the price sheet in disbelief. No wonder Du Weng had been so desperate to get his hands on the treasures beneath the old house. Chapter 117. A man is innocent, but guilty of possessing a treasure. After the appraisal was finished, Lin Bian reached into his pocket and took out a check. With swift, decisive strokes, he filled in the amount, 50 million, as if it were mere pocket change. He handed the check to Lin Yang with a smile. Young man, a pleasure doing business with you. Lin Yang took the check, glanced at it, and half joked. Boss Lin, this is 50 million. You're paying before you even have the goods. Aren't you afraid I might take the money and run? Lin Bian laughed. I've been in business a long time. If I couldn't judge people, my business wouldn't have grown this big. I trust my own judgment. I believe you're trustworthy. Lin Yang nodded. It was only their second meeting, but he sensed there was more to Lin Bian's identity than met the eye. The antiques trade often runs in gray areas. Without a strong background, it's hard to grow a large operation. After the deal was done and noon approached, grateful and curious, Lin Yang insisted on treating Lin Bian to a meal. Lin Bian agreed, and they went to Xiangxi tribe. The place had a strong Xiangxi flavor, wooden architecture with an old-world charm, red lanterns swaying gently at the entrance. Lin Yang asked for a private room, prioritizing discretion. Once the dishes arrived, Lin Bian waved away his assistant and the server. The private room fell silent. Only the two of them remained, close enough to hear each other breathe. Lin Bian leaned forward, studying Lin Yang, and said slowly, Young man, I know what you want to ask. Lin Yang's heart skipped. He had invited Lin Bian precisely because of the old book he'd found beneath the house. He hadn't asked at the tea house because of the crowd. Now, with privacy secured, he spoke plainly. Yes, can you tell me what that ancient book is? Lin Bian grew serious and asked, Have you ever heard of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom treasure? The name hit Lin Yang like a jolt. All the legends surged up. The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's so-called holy treasury, where private hoarding was forbidden and all wealth was surrendered to the state. At its height, it controlled wealth across half the richest regions of the country. When Tianjin fell and their forces were destroyed, a vast amount of the holy treasury's gold, jewels, and treasures vanished. Many later searched for it and failed. Lin Bian continued. The spy Zhang Jigang wrote that the holy treasury alone contained over 18 million taels of silver. On top of that, the Taiping troops pillaged untold amounts of gold, silver, and cultural relics. people believed the Taiping buried their treasure underground. Before their defeat at the Dadu River, they left a cryptic map that only said the treasure was facing water and backed by mountains, the treasure within. Legend holds that the Taiping treasure lies under the city wall at Tongji Gate in Jinling. In 1912, they mounted a major excavation there. They dug for over a month, reached more than 40 meters deep, and found nothing. They gave up. Lin Yang listened, his mind racing. He'd heard the legends, but had never imagined the depth of hidden information behind them. If the old book really pertained to that treasure, the implications were staggering. 18 million taels of silver, converted to modern value, would already be worth billions. Add in priceless cultural relics and artifacts, each carrying immense historical value, and the total could easily reach tens of billions, perhaps far more. If his book pointed to that treasure, it would be explosive news. It would draw every greedy eye in the country. Lin Yang remembered the uproar years ago at Tianma Mountain in Xing City when rumors of a ton of gold in a Han tomb drew tomb robbers from everywhere. People competed violently, and lives were lost, all for a ton of gold worth less than $1 billion. The Taiping treasure's value could be orders of magnitude greater. He shuddered to think how many would be driven to frenzy. Seeing that Lin Yang had already guessed the book's possible significance, Lin Bian said, "An innocent man becomes guilty the moment he possesses something valuable. I won't expose this. How you handle it is your decision." What Lin Bian meant was that the old book he'd photographed for Lin Yang was essentially a map, an implied guide to the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's treasure. A hoard that had plundered the wealth of much of prosperous Daxia. Its value was beyond imagination. But without strength, such a burden would not bring fortune. It would bring endless trouble. "Thanks for the reminder, Boss Lin," Lin Yang said. He had already resolved to hide the book until he was strong enough to do anything with it, and to let no one else know. From now on, he would not only try to make more money, he would work to increase his power. He was quietly relieved that Lin Bian seemed trustworthy and harbored no foul intentions regarding the Taiping treasure. On the contrary, he had warned him. Perhaps he was grateful because Chen Qingqing had saved his life. Lin Yang smiled. Chen Qingqing had helped him before when he sold the yuan blue and white porcelain, and it seemed fortune favored him again. He would find a way to thank her properly. Their conversation ended for the moment, and they went back to lunch. Lin Yang reached for his phone on the table to slip it into his pocket. As he did, something the size of a baby's palm slid out with the movement and clattered to the floor. He looked down and recognized the pink crab he dug up the day before at the old house. At the time, he'd assumed it was a rough child's toy from some landlord and stuffed it into his pocket without taking a photo. Lin Bian's attention was caught by the sound of the fall. His eyes locked onto the crab as if drawn. In an instant, his eyes widened to the point of disbelief, his face drained of color. He looked as if he'd seen something that could upend everything he knew. His body stiffened, his chopsticks clattered to the table, and time seemed to stop, the only sound his quickened breathing. After a long moment, Lin Bian blinked and forced himself to speak. Little brother, may I see that crab?" There was a tremor in his voice that betrayed excitement and agitation. Lin Yang picked the crab up and handed it over. Lin Bian took it with both hands as if it were a priceless relic, his gaze intent and reverent. He produced a soft brush from his kit and began to clean it, brushing away dust and grime with almost painful gentleness. Then he took a clean white gauze, dipped it in a special solution, and carefully wiped the crab's body. With every careful stroke, the rough, ordinary look gave way to a delicate outline. The dull pink lent a richer, more luminous hue. "It's the charming luster of a purple-pink tourmaline," Lin Bian breathed. He went on, voice full of excitement. "The crab's body is carved from a single piece of tourmaline, warm and fine in texture, with internal veins visible under light. The eyes are white jade, round and bright. The 8 legs and 2 claws are gold, every joint exquisitely worked. The gold's sheen and the tourmaline's glow complement each other, giving this piece a unique, astonishing luxury. One of these tourmaline gold crabs far exceeds all the antiques you sold today." Lin Bian's shock made Lin Yang realize this was no ordinary find. He remembered how composed Lin Bian had been when they discussed the Taiping treasure. To make a man of his means, the kind who could write a check for hundreds of millions without a blink, look like this meant the crab had to be extraordinary. It seemed even more significant than the book. "Boss Lin, does this crab have a special origin?" Lin Yang asked. Lin Bian put a finger to his lips and leaned in, staring down at the crab's underside as if he'd just seen something crucial. There, carved into the belly in vigorous, ancient characters despite the wear of time, were 4 words: Taiping Sacred Treasury. The sight of those characters took Lin Bian's breath away. The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's treasure flashed through his mind. The crab's appearance suddenly felt far from coincidental. He straightened with a grave look. The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's sacred treasury system was strict. Wealth had to be submitted to the treasury and then distributed. This crab is inscribed Taiping Sacred Treasury. It could be a key clue to the treasure, or even a key itself. His eyes glinted with the image of the legendary hoard. After a few seconds, he recovered himself and handed the crab back to Lin Yang. "You must keep this safe and show it to no one. This is not a small matter." Lin Yang nodded. He hadn't expected the crab to be connected to the Taiping treasure, like the old book, and it seemed it might be even more important. He remembered digging it up and thinking it crude and worthless, never imagining it to be a precious artifact. He marveled at the twists of fate and realized he had unwittingly stepped into a much larger mystery. Why had the book been hidden inside the box's lining while this crab lay scattered in the dirt outside? The questions clustered around him like fog, leaving him baffled and uneasy. Chapter 119, Driving Practice with My Father. After dinner, Lin Yang helped Lin Bian and his assistant load more than 10 bags of antiques into their car in the mall parking lot. After they drove off, Lin Yang said his goodbyes and headed home alone. On the drive, he kept thinking about the ancient book that hinted at the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom treasures and the tourmaline golden crab, both tied to the legend that the Taiping army had hidden treasures taken from more than half of the great Xia kingdom. He had no idea where to keep such things. A rural, self-built house had almost no security. If they were stolen, the loss would be devastating. His mother had hidden the gold he bought for her under her pillow and had been too nervous to travel far ever since. She only felt calm when someone was home. Rebuilding the house with proper security was the ideal solution, but that would take time. For now, he needed safes. He pulled over and searched the county map for safe stores. 2 appeared. He picked one at random, Ipu Safe, and drove there. He arrived in just over 10 minutes. As soon as Lin Yang parked, a middle-aged man walked out of the shop, opened the door for him, and greeted him warmly. "Boss, you're here to buy a safe, right? I'm Xiao Ma. Tell me what you need. Our store should have something that fits." Lin Yang smiled at the man's deference. He was clearly older, but overly polite, and asked, curious, "You came out as soon as I parked. How did you know I wanted a safe?" Xiao Ma grinned. He'd been in the business a long time and had a knack for reading customers. He explained that he watched the street all day and could tell a lot from how a car stopped. Seeing Lin Yang's luxury car and the way he carried himself, Xiao Ma guessed correctly. "I figured you'd stop for a safe," he said. "Might as well ask." The shop was large and mostly empty, rows of safes in all sizes and price ranges, thousands to hundreds of thousands, even millions. Xiao Ma led Lin Yang straight to the smallest model and beamed. Lin Yang was surprised to learn it cost 1 million. "This little one's our ace," Xiao Ma said. The body's made from a newly developed alloy steel, much stronger and tougher than ordinary plates. Ordinary tools won't even leave a mark. He pointed to the lock. "It uses live iris recognition. Everyone's irises are unique. Your eyes are the key. Even if someone has your key or password, they can't open it. It's got multiple encryption systems. Cracking it isn't possible." To demonstrate, Xiao Ma grabbed an electric saw. The blade spun and screamed as he pressed it against the safe's side. Sparks flew, but after he shut the saw off, the surface was untouched, no scratches. Lin Yang ran his fingers over the cool metal and felt reassured. "Good," he said. "I'll take 2. Xiao Ma's face lit up. 1 million each. I'll arrange delivery and installation right away. Lin Yang didn't hesitate. He swiped his card and paid 2 million on the spot. Xiao Ma completed the paperwork, explained how to use the safes, and handed over a post-sales service commitment. Lin Yang asked that they be moved into his car immediately. The safes were for temporary use until the house could be rebuilt and professionally secured. Back home, he carried one safe into his room, registered his iris as instructed, and placed the ancient book and the tourmaline crab inside. He closed the door, and the mechanism clicked. The safe locked automatically. A new, deep sense of security washed over him. He put the other safe in his mother's room and told her, "Put all the gold and other valuables in here. No one can open it except you and me." His mother looked at the shiny safe, relief and surprise on her face. "Good, Xiaoyang. You always think ahead. Now I can go out without worrying." After he finished, Lin Yang sat in the yard to rest. His father came up, an eager but slightly embarrassed look on his face. "Xiaoyang," he said, "I passed Subject 1 already, but I've been practicing Subject 2 for 2 days, and I'm still not steady. Can you drive me to that open space in the village so I can practice?" "Sure, Dad. Let's go now," Lin Yang replied. His mother chimed in, "I'm free too. I'll come along and watch." They piled into the car, and Lin Yang drove to the village practice area. His father sat in the passenger seat, staring ahead and mumbling the instructor's tips while his hands mimed steering, so serious he looked like he was already in a training car. His mother watched him and laughed. "Your dad's obsessed since he started learning. He talks about buying a car every day. He even dreams about driving." Lin Yang smiled. "How about I go to the county town in a couple of days and buy you a car?" "Really?" His father brightened. "That'd be wonderful. Zhang Dachang's son bought him a car, and he shows it off every day. I'm tired of being the only one without one." As if on cue, when they reached the village entrance, they ran into Zhang Dachang. He waved them down, eyes sparkling when he saw Lin Yang's car. Lin Yang pulled over and rolled down the window. "Uncle Chiang, what a coincidence," he said. Zhang leaned toward the car, glanced at Lin Yang's father, and grinned. "Old Lin, I heard your birthday's coming up. Didn't Xiaoyang say he'd buy you a car? When are you getting it? I can't wait to see you driving it." Lin Yang's father beamed and announced, "I'm still practicing, so I wanted to wait until I was good enough before buying. But Xiaoyang insisted, said if I scratched it, we'd just get another. I finally gave in. We're going to the county town to look at cars first thing tomorrow morning." Chapter 120. Build a New House. Even at his age, Lin Weiguo wasn't slow to learn. After only a few driving lessons, he had essentially mastered all the maneuvers for the second part of the driving test. Once Lin Yang suggested buying a car first, his father's enthusiasm only grew. He stayed out practicing until it was nearly dark. Only when Lin Yang insisted for safety's sake did he finally stop, and Lin Yang drove them home. Back at the house, Lin Weiguo's wife headed straight to the kitchen. Soon the familiar aromas filled the rooms, and the whole house felt warm and alive. They gathered around the table, the dishes steaming and the light soft and comfortable. Lin Yang set down his chopsticks, smiled, and looked at his parents. "Dad, Mom," he said earnestly, "life's getting better now. Do you want to stay in the old house forever, or would you rather come live with me in the city? Everything's more convenient there." Lin Weiguo paused, his chopsticks frozen for a moment. Then he smiled and waved his hand. "No, Xiaoyang. Your mother and I have lived in the countryside our whole lives. We're used to it here. We know every tree and every neighbor. If we went to the city, we'd feel out of place." His mother nodded. "That's right. City houses are fine, but they always feel a bit impersonal. Out here, the air is fresh, and we can grow our own vegetables and keep chickens. It's more comfortable." Hearing them, Lin Yang understood exactly how they felt. He nodded, then continued. "I know you're attached to this place, and I think it's a good home, but this house is old and unsafe. I want to tear it down and rebuild. What do you think?" His parents exchanged a hesitant look. His father put down his chopsticks and said seriously, "Xiaoyang, that's kind of a big expense. You don't need to spend so much. A simple renovation would be enough if it's livable." "Exactly," his mother agreed. "We're ordinary people. No need to be extravagant. The frame is still solid. New furnishings and a bit of repair will do." Lin Yang saw the worry in their faces and felt his chest tighten. He took their hands and spoke with steady confidence. "Don't worry about the money. I can earn a living now and I've saved up. I can afford to rebuild the house. I want you to live more comfortably and safely. That's what I want." Emotion filled his parents' eyes. They realized their son had grown up and was capable of taking care of them. His father patted his hand, his eyes a little misty. "All right, if you say so, we'll go along with whatever you decide." His mother dabbed at her eyes and smiled. "As long as you're happy, we're happy. We're proud to have a son like you." With their consent, Lin Yang felt a rush of joy and anticipation. He began to picture his parents living in a bright, comfortable, safe new home and couldn't help smiling. Growing up, he had often envied other families' well-decorated houses, small villas with nice finishes, while his own had bare red brick walls and no decoration. He had always hoped they could build something nicer someday. Now it seemed that wish might finally come true. Rebuilding would be a major project, and Lin Yang didn't want just a makeshift crew from the village. Those houses might look fine from a distance, but wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. He thought for a moment, then remembered Teacher Wang had mentioned her husband worked for a large construction company. That might be the way to get a professional team. Without finishing his meal, Lin Yang called Teacher Wang. After exchanging greetings, he explained, "I'm planning to tear down and rebuild our old house. I heard your husband works at a construction company. Could you ask if his company could handle this job? I'd really appreciate it." Teacher Wang, always warm and eager to help former students, agreed at once. "Xiaoyang, don't worry about it. I'll ask right away and call you back." That evening, Teacher Wang's husband, Xiao Jian, came home looking exhausted and worried. Teacher Wang met him at the door. "What's wrong? Did something happen at work?" Xiao Jian sank into the sofa and gave a rueful laugh. "It's the company. Business has been so slow lately. We haven't landed a big project in ages. The capital chain is tight and operations are getting difficult. I've even heard management talking about layoffs. I'm really anxious. Maybe I'll be next." Teacher Wang kept calm and tried to comfort him, then said, "I mentioned something else today. My student Lin Yang called. He wants to tear down and rebuild his old house and asked if your company could take it on. What do you think?" Xiaojian frowned. "Our company mainly handles large projects, commercial buildings, and high-rise residential complexes. The smallest projects we take on usually involve tens of millions in investment. Small, rural, self-built houses are low profit and don't fit our business model. From a cost-benefit perspective, it's not ideal." Teacher Wang pressed on. She reminded him how filial Lin Yang was and how he'd always treated her kindly, once even offering a ginseng worth a small fortune without hesitation. "He's a good boy," she said. "Do this as a favor for me." Xiaojian thought it over. He knew Teacher Wang was asking out of affection for her student, and he also knew the company's current backlog was light. After a moment, he said, "All right, I'll try. I can talk to the leadership and see if we can temporarily arrange a team to handle his house. But it depends on the bosses. I can't promise anything." Teacher Wang exhaled in relief. Thank you so much. I knew you'd help." She called Lin Yang right away. "Xiaoyang, I spoke to Uncle Xiao. He said he'll try to help and wants you to come to the company tomorrow to discuss the details in person. Their firm is called Phoenix Construction Company. I'll send you the address." Lin Yang thanked her profusely. "Please give my thanks to Uncle Xiao too. I really appreciate it. I'll be there tomorrow." After hanging up, Lin Yang's mind raced. He hardly slept that night, imagining the meeting and hoping everything would work out.